Bex, thank you so much for coming on to the Catapult podcast. It's great to see just how much you're doing at such an exciting time in the UK theme park / leisure and entertainment industry. There's so much going on. You must be really excited from a fan perspective, just how much is seeming to be cracking off in this country.
Yeah, I think we're about to enter literally a new dawn of theme parks in the UK. I think the last huge year that we had was 1994, the year of the roller coaster. And when we obviously had the big one open and Nemesis open and Shockwave at Drayton
Pre-Spice
Manor.
Girls.
I know. And I remember it, which is making me feel very old. But it's crazy to think actually we haven't really had a huge year since then, not on that scale. And obviously we've had some fantastic investments since then and parks have continued to grow and develop. But recently, I think we've all kind of felt that we've kind of hit a level and there's nothing to really excite us on the horizon. And then obviously our friends from America came in and have blown everything up. And, I get asked a lot, is this the end for the parks as we know them in the UK? And I'm like, no, it's just going to be the start, because when Universal come over here, all everyone's going to do is try and step up. So, yeah, it's really exciting.
It is so good, especially here in the UK. We're going to become the noisy neighbours that are doing the exciting things.
For once.
For once, saying that, it seems to be all over the world. There's brand new projects in the pipeline.
Just
obviously,
one after the other.
We just recently heard about Disney going into the Middle East for the first time, and there is such a charge towards leisure, and I think that's something that we've seen, particularly from the outside of things, looking at consumers and where they're spending their cash. A lot of the narrative in the news has been around the cost of living over the past 3 or 4 years, the fact that people will have less disposable income. And that might be the case, but that isn't stopping people from spending their hard-earned cash on doing something as exciting as going to a theme park.
Yeah, in some ways, I think it's more, and we talked about that on my podcast a few weeks ago. It's almost that when things are a little bit depressing and news isn't great, you want that escapism. You want to be able to go somewhere for the day and just forget that all of this is going on around us and get fully immersed into this new happy place where everything's colourful and bright and things are great and you're having a great time with your friends or your family. I think you actively seek out what a theme park brings you when things aren't great. Actually, a day out at a theme park in this country isn't necessarily a huge amount of money. It adds up when you start taking, your kids and your whole family and you need an overnight stay and food and everything else on top. But if you're just going purely for a day of escapism, you can get a day at a theme park for about £30, and that's probably £30 well spent.
It really is. It really is. And if you've got young children like we both have, we need that day.
Yeah. If only they provided babysitting services as well.
Can you imagine? We need this. We need to push for a crash in the next theme park.
We'll take that one. Take that. If you're listening, theme park operators.
Yeah. Please.
I will pay you any money.
Yeah, we'd pay you more than the admission fee. We can guarantee you that. Well, that's really interesting. Sort of starting to think about, what could be the barriers. We jest about children and our children getting in the way of us having fun. But when you think about what makes the most perfect visit to a theme park, what sort of images or memories spring to mind for you?
It's interesting because I've done a lot of theme park visits in the last month or so in the UK, Europe and America. So I've kind of covered a lot of the major parks, somewhere major in each of those countries. And I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. And I would still say I'm a roller coaster enthusiast. I love theme parks, but in a theme park, it's the roller coasters that are going to draw me there. And I would have said, I think, even just a couple of years ago, I need a massive roller coasters, and that's what's going to make the difference between me having a great day or not. But I have noticed my opinion shift, having been to some smaller parks where they might have a big coaster or two, but it's not their whole driving force. And I've actually had an amazing day there. And it's because you've got that big roller coaster, that big e-ticket, as we would have said, attraction, but you've got a mix of attractions. You've got stuff that my daughter can go on. She's 4, and those attractions are nearby to the big stuff. So I might go and ride the big coaster and my husband can take her on something small. So having that balance nearby, having playgrounds near to big attractions makes a massive difference to my day out. So if I'm in a queue again, she can be going and doing that. Having somewhere that's indoor so that if it starts raining, you've got something that you can go and do. You're not all just kind of huddled in a cafe going, oh, I hope this rain stops soon. Having lots of different indoor attractions that you can go and experience, having things that we can do all together as a family. So there's no height restriction. The park being clean, the staff being really welcoming and friendly and like they love their jobs and that they're happy to be there. I think it's the combination of all those things that give me a bit of a perfect day out. Oh, and the food as well.
The food.
The food is important. I've said before, you don't want a hangry Bex at a theme park. And it sounds stupid, but it is important, and it does make a difference if you can go somewhere and go, actually, that was really good theme park food. It shouldn't be surprising that we can get decent food in a theme park. But I think if you can get all of those things right, and I appreciate that sounds like a very long list of things that I want, that for me, that makes my perfect day.
And it's really interesting you speak about sort of the provisions for younger children. That's something we'll get onto a little bit later in the podcast, but from your perspective, how has the dynamic of a theme park visit changed compared to when it was just you or you and your partner to now having a child? Is there more emphasis required on child-friendly activities, or are you still looking to split your time between things for you and things for your little one?
Yeah, so I do look to split my time. But I don't particularly like splitting my time in a way that means we are going to be separated for a large portion of the day. I mean, somewhere like, I don't want to give an example too much, but if you've got somewhere where there's huge queues and you as a parent have to go and queue in that queue alone, you know you're going to be away from your family for 50 minutes, an hour of the day, and that's just to get one ride in. I get to the point now where that's not worth it for me, and I'd rather just skip the ride than have that separation. If we've gone somewhere as a family, I'd like to do it together. Parent queue share options are something that I feel like I could write a thesis on because having experienced them at so many different parks, and it's actually amazing how different the approach is at different parks.
Well, tell us about the best version of that you've heard of.
I've got two, and they are very different, but they both worked for different reasons. So firstly, Phantasialand over in Germany. There, it's the most simple system in the world. One parent queues. At the end of the ride, they say to one of the ride staff, can I have a baby swap? They literally hand you a ticket. You hand that to your partner. They walk down the fast track and they get on. And it's as simple as that. There is nothing more that goes into it. At Universal, it's completely different. But what they do is they say, right, you queue together as a family. So you actually spend that time together. When you get to the front, there's a family room. And the family room is air conditioned. It has a TV in it. It has sofas in it. It has a water fountain. It sometimes has a loo in it. And you leave your partner at that point. You go and ride. You go back to the room and your partner swaps and you sit in the family room and they go off and ride as well. So that worked really well for us when we went to Universal, but the queues were never that long. I don't know if I'd fancy doing a 3-hour queue like that, but for a 30-minute, 40-minute queue, it was fine. And our daughter is old enough to know that at the end of this queue, there's going to be this room with a TV and you can go and have a sit. And actually we spent, we were together as a family at that point, just kind of talking and making our way through the queue. So as a parent, it was a nicer experience for me to not have to queue alone.
And the curious mind is making me go, have you been on rides where you've done a parent swap, you've gone on first and then you've gone into the family room and you've put a fake moustache on and you've taken the second ride?
Kept on swapping. I haven't. I don't know if they would notice because you do go past the same staff member. So I would have thought if they're fairly astute that they'd they'd noticed that you were the same family were in the family room for quite an extended period of time. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I haven't.
It's worth a go. It's worth a go. Maybe. Who knows?
Just keep laughing it.
No, that's really interesting to hear. And, so I've got a soon-to-be 7 and a 3-year-old. Queuing can be such an arduous task. And even, a 5-minute trip down the road sometimes in the car, asking, are we nearly there yet, can be such a really painful challenge. Yeah. If you're in a queue line for, I'd say, I don't know about you, but my cutoff, if I'm being advertised that it's less than 45 minutes, then I'll take the hit. Yeah. Anything over that, it's like, do you know what? The kids are going to get bored. Yeah. We're going to get angry. It's really not worth the payoff. We'll do something else instead.
That's something that I've definitely found. I'd say the way I work around that, which I found has worked really well, is when there has been, like I said, a playground near a big attraction. So I might go, right, I'll take the hit on the 45-minute queue or the 50-minute, hour-long queue if it was something I really wanted to do, knowing that my husband isn't just sat on a bench with my daughter waiting for me to get off. They can actually, go and do something that's nearby. And she will happily play in a playground for an hour without a second thought. She's at the age where she's not sort of saying, I want to go and do this at the theme park. She's happy to kind of go with the flow. That's going to change as she gets a bit older, and I appreciate that. But that's also, I think, where having a good mix of attractions in the same area really comes into it. So if there are kids' rides close to that big attraction, the other can say, well, let's go and do those. Mum's going to go and ride that massive roller coaster. We'll go and do X, Y, and Z while she's doing that. That's a lot harder if an area is very big ride heavy, 1.4 meter restriction heavy. That's a lot harder to do.
It really is. It really is. Yeah, you bring you back some memories of experiences where we've ended up, myself and my wife, kind of splitting up. Yeah. And sort of doing one kid each to kind of facilitate,
divide and conquer.
And divide and conquer. But that's just life with children, isn't it? So there we go. Excellent. So really interesting to hear around sort of what you think is the perfect day. I assume that a perfect day would be sunny weather of some description.
Yeah, I am of the age.
Not too sunny. It's like going to a festival. You want it sunny, but not blazing hot. You want a bit of overcast cloud, keep it cool, keep it warm.
Yeah. The weather does factor into it, doesn't it? I am of the age where if I planned a theme park day and it's going to rain all day, I will cancel it. I can't do it anymore. I can't go. Actually, I did February half term. They do a fantastic event for kids, the Pirate Takeover. So we did go and do that, and the forecast was good, but on the day it just drizzled all day. I was absolutely soaked through. I've never ever been more grateful to see my hotel room at the end of the day. But yeah, if it's looking torrential, I'm a bit like, nah, I'll sit it out. I'll change it.
Those ponchos don't keep you warm.
They don't at all.
I mean, sometimes they don't keep you dry, but
not the cheap
ones.
Don't
keep you warm. Fantastic. Right. So one of the reasons for bringing you on the call is we've done a bit of research into what are the things that leave theme park guests unhappy. Now, we know that it's probably completely and utterly impossible for a theme park that's probably welcoming millions of people every year to provide the most perfect experience every single time. But when it comes to the design perspective, that's certainly not going to stop us from trying to achieve it.
No.
So we've done some research looking at what is it? What are those bugbears? What do people leave theme parks that make them feel unhappy? Now, we've done some extensive research. This is all over the world. It's not just the UK or the US. And I want you to try and have a go at thinking about what you think are the sort of like top 2 or 3 biggest things that leave guests unhappy before we delve into them.
Okay. In any order?
Any order you want.
Okay, well, queues has got to be one.
Okay.
Ride breakdowns, ride availability generally, I would say is another big one.
Yeah.
Thirdly, bad experience at a theme park, maybe staff interactions.
Okay. Cool.
Maybe.
Cool. Interesting. Right, let's get to it.
You're wrong!
You're wrong! Terrible. No, you're not. You're in the ballpark. I'm just trying to have a poker face so it doesn't
Okay.
give away the fact that you're alarmingly correct. So, like you could Top of the Pops or music show on radio will do a countdown. So, the fifth highest thing that leaves theme podcasts unhappy is ride availability. So you're spot on with that one. So let me give you a little bit more details into what we've found here. So it was 7.5%. That doesn't seem a lot, but 7.5% of global theme podcasts say that they lament the missed opportunity to ride the coaster that was on their wish list. Many said it was due to technical difficulties or operational inconsistency, but there was even a concern around cancelled shows or shows just not being on in off-peak season.
Yeah.
And saying that actually when that is promoted and marketed on websites, they expect it and it not being there. So ride availability was bang on the money. So
well,
I guess
there you go. That's probably because that's my number one bugbear. If it was mine, it's number one. Availability, operations are my, I could talk about it all day, but I fully appreciate it. Especially, this is what I always say, and amongst enthusiasts, we can get caught in our own little world sometimes and think, well, that Nemesis wasn't open today, but it's all right, I'll go back tomorrow because I've got an annual pass. Most theme park guests don't have an annual pass. This is a once a year, once a 5-year visit for them. And if a ride is down all day and they really wanted to get on it, of course they're going to leave disappointed. That they're not going to be able to just come back tomorrow. And I think obviously stuff goes wrong at theme parks all the time. I had a really interesting chat with the former operations director of Alton Towers, who really gave us some detail on why these things happen and why sometimes there's nothing that can be done to get a ride up and operating as much as the park really, really want it to. But as a guest, it's still frustrating. You go on the app and you just see closed, and that's the first you've heard of it. Nothing has told you beforehand that ride isn't going to operate today. It's super frustrating.
Yeah, absolutely. There was also mention in the research around people waiting in queues in a ride that they already knew was delayed in some way because of an issue, and it was the gradual eating away of their time in the park that was kind of the most frustrating thing.
Yeah.
Rather than not being actually able to get on that specific ride.
It's the not knowing sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something I was going to come to actually was this idea that guests appreciate most efficient honesty. That's kind of like the best way you could describe it, which is tell me as soon as possible whether this is achievable or not. And aside the operational challenges of, trying to figure that out, I guess just good old-fashioned communication does the job just as well for visitors.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there comes a point sometimes when you've been in a queue a long time that you kind of think you've passed the point of no return. And if you've given it an hour, you're like, well, even if they tell me, there's going to be an extended period of downtime, do I leave the queue at this point? Because I've already committed. And that's a really hard decision to make sometimes. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, next one. And I will say, in this top 10, a couple of these surprised me a little bit. So the top 4, so the fourth highest that leave guests unhappy was what was kind of broadly described as a lack of public amenities. So we're not talking about toilets as such, but we're talking about things like benches and areas for people to rest against, as well as shaded areas in sunny weather.
Yeah.
Sort of linked into this as well, I think it's certainly it's a topic that has more brevity than this category, but better accessibility routes were mentioned. So there are a combination of old and new parks that have steps in certain areas, and obviously if you're in a wheelchair, pushchair, need some sort of accessibility. There is still physical barriers there. But yeah, a lot of people, and maybe this is down to some of the larger parks outside of the UK, said that they complained of physical discomfort due to a lack of amenities, including benches.
Interesting.
So whether we're, taking data from maybe an older group of people that just want to sit down after a long day, or whether we are talking to absolute marathon runners who are trying to blitz a park and get to a point where you're like, I just need to sit down.
I think one thing I have noticed, I mean, I've never noticed a lack of benches. I can't say I've ever thought, I wish there was a bench here. But I have noticed most parks in the UK, you can obviously take your own food into. And often there is a lack of covered areas where you can sit and eat your own food. So, obviously that mentions shaded areas, but for us, I think it's like rainproof area. And you will often then find that because there isn't anywhere for people to go, they will go and take their own food into park cafes and things like that. And then they take up tables that actual paying guests for that cafe want to use. So that is something that I think we could do with a bit more, well, generally indoor areas in parks. But if that also included some sort of area where people could sit, whether it's sunny or rainy, then yeah, that would definitely help things.
Yeah, really interesting point about sort of that knock-on effect of just not having enough things on the outside. So yeah, that's really interesting. And that actually links quite closely into the third highs, which is cleanliness. So I think this kind of ties in with having enough bins or sufficient bins as well. There was a fantastic quote that I found whilst I was doing this research, which was, dirty, bad-smelling park will detract from the overall guest experience. And I'm thinking, that detracts from any experience in any place around the world. I don't think it's inextricably linked to theme parks.
No.
But still, there seems to be, from the research that we've done, obviously people don't want a dirty place that they visit, but there's a link between somewhere being clean and somewhere being trustworthy. And those two things kind of go hand in hand. If I trust that the park is maintained in public spaces, I feel more confident in the bigger rides where I might be a little bit nervous.
That actually makes sense.
So that was really interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And I've just come back from the Netherlands. I went to visit Toverland over there. And whenever I go to the Netherlands, it always strikes me as a very clean, very neat country. But you can just see it in the park. There is no litter anywhere. I saw countless gardeners just tending to flower beds and things like that. The paths were all perfect. There was no graffiti. And, we talked earlier about perfect park experiences. That actually genuinely did make us feel like we were in a nice, well cared for, well kept park. So yeah, that I can see how people would kind of put that onto ride maintenance and stuff like that, even if I wouldn't necessarily. But I can see how it gives that impression, and it definitely makes for a better guest experience if you're in a nice clean park. You're not surrounded by overflowing bins and
and it's amazing that something you could see it as quite a functional part of the experience, that actually is just a change of a dustbin or an extra person cleaning up. It makes a huge difference. And whilst we're on the subject of cleanliness, can we talk about toilets? Like,
we probably should.
They vary in experience. Oh, no. And something, I think I mentioned it on a round table that we both did a couple of months ago now. Functionally, I've been into toilets where maybe 90% of them in the male don't have baby changing facilities. So that's something that really winds me up.
It winds me up. I bet it winds your wife up as well. I've got nothing to do other than hand you the baby because I can't change them.
That's so true. In worst case scenarios, when we're talking about punamis or, really big instances where we need a nappy change immediately, and there is an accessible toilet, the complete and utter guilt that I feel of using that, because there is literally nowhere else.
Oh, it's horrendous.
Really, really sucks.
And we shouldn't have to use an accessible toilet to change our baby. There should be dedicated unisex baby changing facilities. We're in 2025. Come on guys.
We need this.
No, definitely that grinds my gears. Again, not just a theme park problem, but something that you find a lot.
So true.
Yeah.
And toilets in general, there is quite a degree of success, I guess, in maintaining toilets. I know they're busy areas and I know they're well used places, but if you think about shopping centres, if you think about some airports, there is a way to keep those facilities kind of good.
Yeah.
Even with the amount of people. And sometimes I feel like maybe some parks could do a little bit more in that realm.
I think even things like just making sure there's enough toilet roll and things like that, and that the sinks are working and the soap dispensers are filled up. That's kind of basic hygiene standards. That's not asking a lot. But then I would also, point you in the direction of Phantasialand, which is a hugely visited theme park in Europe, which has some of the most incredible toilets I've ever seen in my theme park travels. Like, beautifully themed, beautifully kept, maintained. I've never gone into one and thought it was a bit grotty in here, and they manage it. So yeah, it's not unachievable. I think it's just prioritizing it and prioritizing that as a guest experience.
Absolutely, so true. Right, okay, enough toilet talk. We'll move on from cleanliness. I didn't think it'd go that way, but there we go. I brought up the subject of toilets. Okay, so the second thing that leaves guests unhappy is value for money. Okay, so I'll read out a little bit of the research here just to give you a context. This was 12.5% of theme park guests globally have complained about value for money, with the issues spanning both the admission ticket but also the spend on F&B and merchandise. A good example of F&B complaint was that there was some previous industry research done that found that only 60% of people were satisfied with their beverages at theme parks. So there's two things in action here. I think, first of all, value for money in terms of going to the experience and your ticket admission, but it's also the added spend as well. So in your own sort of personal life, how do you perceive value for money when going to a theme park?
It is really hard because, like I said, I actually don't think park admission alone in this country is very expensive. Like I said, you can get a day at a theme park for about £30, and as going as an individual and taking your own lunch with you, it's a cheap day out if you choose to do nothing else. But how many people visit like that? So £30 times it by an average of 4. If you're going with a family, you've got to travel there. You've often got to pay for car parking. You've probably maybe got a hotel stay unless you live very close. And then you've got all your food on top of that. I would still say it's value for money, even if that cost runs into £300 plus. If you come away with that thinking you've had a good day, and that's where everything else plays into it, like your park operations and your ride availability and how long you've had to queue for anything. If all of those things have been bad as well, that £300 suddenly seems like a lot of money to have wasted on a poor experience. If they've gone really well, you think, well, we've spent £300 to have a great family overnight stay together and a day at a theme parks. I think alone, if you just took a theme park and went, this is how much it costs to get in there, is it value for money? I'd say there's not a theme park in this country that isn't value for money at the moment, if everything's working. But too often everything isn't working, and too often the big things aren't working and the experience isn't great. So yeah, it's a hard one. I'll go back to the Universal example. We went over to Epic and it cost us £150 each to get into Epic Universe. Now, if you said that to someone in the UK and said it's going to cost you £150 to go to a theme park today, we're not doing that. But for us at the time, and even now, we'd say that was worth that cost because of the experience that we got and the experience that park gave us. And actually, I think if you invest a little bit into parks, park operators can then charge more because they're offering an experience that is worth more money. Again, something that Mark Shaw talked about when I spoke to him, and he turned around a theme park in Australia that was the second lowest rated, and he turned it to the highest rated in Australia, and he put up the prices and he made more money from it. But it started with the guest experience at that park and the ride lineup and the operations and the customer service. So yeah, I think taking the price alone is a really hard thing to kind of put something on.
Yeah, I completely agree. This is the thing with value for money. It means different things to lots of people. So it's hard to kind of nail it down. There was a really interesting example of a client we worked with for a few years, and they decided a couple of years ago to maintain the reduced visitor numbers that they'd had to do through coming out of the pandemic lockdowns, because they were seeing that there was a better experience for guests with fewer people in there, but was still able to increase the price as a result.
Okay.
And what they've seen is a massive uptick in terms of their customer service, people spending more, people staying longer as well, probably because they can get on rides, twice instead of just once. But they're actively driving value for money by effectively reducing the amount of people in the park. A very, very bold move. But that's something that's really pulled off for them and pulled off very well.
And that's really interesting. And would I spend more for a day out at a theme park if I knew there was a capped capacity and I was not going to queue longer than 30 minutes for anything? I absolutely would. I would take the higher spend over that experience any day. Obviously, I'm an enthusiast, so maybe my answer might be out of sync. A lot of people might be just want the cheapest day out possible, and I don't care if I'm going to queue up for 3 hours for everything. But yeah, for me, if you double my ticket price but guarantee me I'm not going to get caught in huge queues, I'll do it. Yeah, absolutely.
There we go. You heard it here first.
There is a big but.
I'm going to...
I have to not have the... Don't double my price and make me stand in the queue. I'll be outrageous.
Yeah. And lots of caveats we need to insert into that. And finally, on this section as well, you mentioned food right at the very start and the importance of theme park food. When it comes to value for money, I mean, if you're not taking food in already, are you expecting restaurant standard food? Are you expecting something better? Are you expecting something themed? What is it that guarantees value for money from a food context, even if it means spending, 30 quid on a burger?
Yeah, and I think this is it. I think everyone knows you're in a theme park, you're going to pay over the odds for food. It's just a given. I think all you want is to feel like I've had a theme park premium on it, but it's not absolutely extortionate. So you're not charging me £10 for chips or something like that, or you're not charging me £15 for a burger, which is clearly the most cheapest, nastiest meat in it at all. Like, charge me £15, make it at least half decent. I think if food is themed, I think you can get away with actually putting a premium on it as well. I think, Disney show us that every single day, the amount of food options they have there, which people go crazy for, and they will spend however much money on a Gideon's cookie because it's good and it looks good and it looks huge and tasty, and it's kind of become a cult item in itself. But I think if you just try and farm out what looks like canteen food at a theme park premium price, that's when people are going to get annoyed by it. And they'll get annoyed, they'll complain about it, and the next time they'll bring their own food. So no one's a winner in the situation. I think it's on parks to try and create an offering that makes sense so that people go, actually, let's just eat whilst we're there because it's not too bad. And I'm going to bring up the same example again, Fantasyland. That is a park where I would never take my own food in because the food options there are so good, even for like grab and go stuff. And it's not complex. It's nothing groundbreaking. They've just made it decent and not hugely inflated.
Yeah, it's a similar experience that I've had at Tivoli Gardens, where I think there's probably more like food outlets than there is rides. It's got to be at least 50-50. There are so many places. There's a fine dining place if you really wanted to. People kind of like having taster menus, which just blew my mind that those two things could coexist within the same space. But it was great. And you weren't being charged silly prices. There is a happy medium to be had. So that's good. Okay, I haven't got a drum, so I can't do a drum roll to get to the number one. But here we go. The number one thing.
There we go.
Excessive wait times. There we go. It came up eventually. I'm sure no one will be surprised by that. So again, to give you a bit of context, 20% of all global theme park guests said they were unhappy due to a prolonged ride wait time. As well as long queues, guests also raised the issue of poor crowd management in the same breath, leading to frustration and exhaustion on their day. Wait times in the eyes of the guests are also linked to a perceived value of the day. Much has been done in large theme parks to provide entertainment and theming in queue lines, but can more be done to ease the operational pinch points, as well as those smaller parks that maybe don't have the thematic queue lines of some of the big players. So yes, your thoughts? Not surprised?
I'm not surprised. I don't know what the answer is. I genuinely don't, because I mean, apart from the answer that you've just given, where the park example you've said have basically just charged people more to give them a better experience and a lower queue time. I like that way of thinking, but I think just from a general point of view, a theme park in the summer, how are you ever going to get away from a long queue? I don't think you will, because if they limit it too much, they're just not going to make the money that they need to see them through the rest of the year. I do think the queue experience is something that can make a difference, and there's nothing worse than seeing a cattle pen in front of you, either in the rain or the sun, as we talked about, no cover. I think virtual queues aren't necessarily the answer.
What do you think why has that not hit the mark?
I don't know if it's the technology isn't there yet. I know Disney in Orlando used to have a very popular system where you can basically pre-book your line on 3 rides, and that seemed to work pretty well. Once you'd ridden your 3rd ride, you could then pre-book a time slot for another ride and continue that way. And I didn't ever really hear people complaining about that, but they did get rid of it and obviously replace it with a upcharge version. But the experience I had, every single person in the park is looking at their phone and they're refreshing the virtual queue page, waiting for it to go blue. And everyone is doing it. No one's looking up. No one's enjoying the park. Everyone is stood still at that point trying to get a virtual queue slot. And when it does go live, you might get into it. And I got into it quite a few times. And you try and choose a slot and it boots you out. And you try again and it boots you out and it boots you out. And eventually it all just disappears. And there you go. That's the 11 o'clock fun over. And you then wait until 3 o'clock and you do it all again. But what I didn't like is that feeling of, right, okay, we're coming up to a release time, so we're going to have to stop what we're doing. We need to make sure we're not on a ride, and we need to start looking at our phone. And both me and my husband need to stop and start refreshing our phone. That's not the experience I want in a theme park. I don't want to be doing that. I want to be just living in the moment a little bit and deciding where I want to go next. I don't know. I guess at least if you really, really, really want to ride that attraction, you have the option to go and stand for 4 hours if that's what you want to do. But I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're even close to being there yet. So for me, the better option is you have a really well-themed queue line with interactive stuff in it and stuff to keep you occupied. And if you are queuing with your child as well, stuff that they are interested in. The Bowser's Castle example at Epic Universe is one of those where there's loads going on and it's fully in the aircon and there's absolutely loads to see and do whilst you're waiting in that queue. And the same with the Ministry of Magic one. Actually, it's, how do I put into words what that queue line looks like? It's incredible. It's an attraction in itself. That's universal standard, and we can't expect that at every theme park. But I do think there's more parks can do with their queue lines to just make it a better experience rather than trudging through a cattle pen. And whilst I'm at it, can we please...
Here we go. She's on a soapbox.
Can we please stick to the non-smoking and vaping rules that the parks themselves set? Because there's nothing worse than standing in a cattle pen queue line and someone smoking or vaping and you cannot escape from it. That properly winds me up.
Yeah, I can imagine. I've experienced it in multiple places as well, actually.
Yeah, it's horrendous.
Sometimes it's hard to know whether it's a vape or it's part of this sort of smelly experience.
It's a smell part. I mean, yeah, someone gets about to be ejected from the park. No, it wasn't my vape, it was a smell pod.
Cool. Okay, so I thought what would be great is have a look at the top 10 reasons. So you can see the top 5 that we've been through right at the top of the chart there. So we've got wait times, value for money, cleanliness, public amenities, and ride availability. And then, again, some things that you've mentioned already. So the staff experience, so people having Negative interactions with staff, that's something that was raised. The entrance experience. So this was predominantly the bigger parks where people were turning up, half an hour before gates were opening, and, they were itching to get through the door. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. We know people are eager to get in, but at the same time, people felt it was inefficient. Interesting unmet expectations. People going and being under a sort of disguise that through the marketing or the comms of the park, they was expecting to get something and they didn't. That was one half of that issue. The other half was that people have been to visitor attractions nearby and it's been better. So they leave feeling a bit meh about the situation. And the final two are parking. Car parking was an issue. Both the distance required from the car park to the attraction, the paying of car parking, and also the lack of transport internally, whether it's a monorail or another version that took people to the park was not working during off-peak. And then finally, provision for young kids, which we touched on at the start, actually. So in particular, children under school age, so 5 years or younger, not having enough things for kids to do, particularly if there is height-sensitive rides there as well. So anything there that shocks you?
No, nothing shocks me. I think the provisions for young kids, if you asked purely a panel of parents that same question, it would probably score quite a bit higher. Obviously, this has come from globally, and lots of people who will have given feedback will have been, maybe not had kids, so it's not something that registers for them. But I think as you get older and you do start having a young family, you really notice it at theme parks. You notice things that wouldn't have even crossed your mind before, like you say, the baby changing and what do I do whilst I want to go on that ride and my partner waits. So yeah, I think we should remember that theme parks are family days out first and foremost, and I think having something for all of the family, and that includes grandparents actually, I think we'll see more and more that grandparents will be part of theme park experiences. Grandparents are getting younger and they'll want to go and experience this with their grandchildren. They might not necessarily want to get on a huge hypercoaster, but they might want to do some stuff whilst they're there. So having things that meet a whole range of age ranges, I think, will become more important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that point about grandparents is really, really interesting and quite universal, despite the sort of quirks of population ages around the world. Grandparents right now are the wealthiest in society, and they have the most amount of time. And we did a bit of research a few years ago looking at grandfluencers, we call them, which are they're not social media influencers, but they are influencing the decisions of where they're taking their grandchildren. And that typically is some sort of leisure activity, whether it's going to a theme park, whether it's going elsewhere. So the requirement for them to have something, maybe this is where the benches have come from, the need for benches. It's all these grandparents that were trying to a very sweeping stereotype.
I'll be honest, I like a sit. I like a sit. I'm 40 years old. I'm ready for a sit at various points during the day.
Fantastic. Right. Well, that's the top 10. Bex, thanks so much for joining us to talk through those and talk through your perfect day at a theme park. If you had one wish at your next theme park visit, what would it to make it the most perfect day?
I think it's got to just, and this isn't a wish that will never happen, but everything working. If there is no ride downtime on anything, every scene in a dark ride is working, everything is running efficiently, I can take anything. I can take the bad weather, I can take the bad food. But that would massively, that makes my day if everything is kind of running as it should. It never happens. It's never happened yet.
Challenge accepted, I think we'd say, from the industry perspective. But yeah, brilliant. Thank you. And thank you for
thanks for having me.
Really great to speak to you.